Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. There is nothing between us. At least, that's what I kept telling myself that night when I first saw it on their faces. It was a Thursday. Late. I'd come back home from an after-hours meeting that ran longer than expected, some fiasco with building permits, and a sudden deadline. I stepped through the front door, briefcase still in my hand, tie loosened around my neck like a noose. My wife, Becky, stood in the hallway. My cousin Mike was there, too, just a step behind her. The lights were half dimmed, as though they'd hurried to flip the switch the moment they heard my key in the lock. There was a sudden hush, a moment where their eyes snapped to mine with a flash of panic, or maybe guilt, and all I could think was, why guilt? A knot formed in my stomach, but I couldn't name it yet. My heartbeat hammered as Becky's lips parted, but no sound came out. Mike offered an unconvincing smile. Too wide, too casual, like he was forcing it. I tried to speak, something like, "Hey, what's going on?" But the words never quite found my tongue. They both stood there, caught in the awkward tension of two actors who forgot their lines. Nothing, I told myself. Nothing between them. It's late, that's all. Mike probably stopped by to drop something off. Let's not be paranoid. I moved forward. My steps felt heavier than usual. Becky forced a laugh, too bright. She said, "Your cousin just wanted to talk." And I cut her off with a staccato wave of my hand. About what? I asked. Direct, my voice an octave lower than usual, the raw edge of suspicion scraping through my throat. She tried again. About your mom's upcoming birthday. Right, Mike? He cleared his throat. Yeah, Aunt Carol's big 6'5", right? A clumsy lie. He couldn't remember my mother's age off the top of his head. That told me everything. But in that trembling moment, I still tried to stuff my doubts down. I let that conversation die, swirling in my mind like a half-formed storm, then forced myself to go upstairs. I recall sitting on the edge of the bed, tie in hand, staring at my reflection in the dark mirror. No lights, just the faint glow of the street lamp outside. And I remember whispering to myself, there is nothing between them. Go to sleep. But I couldn't. Something was off. I felt it in the pit of my gut, that creeping sense of being unwelcome in my own home. I was the outsider that night. The extra. The third wheel. That's when it first struck me, that rancid sensation of being superfluous, like I'd interrupted an intimate moment meant for two. That was the beginning. I need you to understand one thing about me. I used to trust Becky completely. We had a life together, a family, a house in suburban Seattle, a yard for the kids to run around in. I'd come home from work, exhausted, but the moment the kids shouted "Dad" from the porch, everything felt worth it. And Becky, she used to look at me like I was the man who could anchor her in this chaotic world. She used to say, "You're my rock." I lived for that. So when doubt crept in, I tried to slam the door on it. For days, maybe weeks, I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that any strange moment was just a coincidence. An odd phone call where she left the room to speak in hushed tones, or a text on her phone that made her drop the device the instant I glanced at it. I found reasons to explain it all away. She's busy with new clients, I thought. She's stressed with freelance deadlines. Mike is family. He's no threat. Don't be a fool. But a single night changed everything. I was in the living room, half dozing in my armchair after dinner. Becky had tucked the kids in, and I heard her hum a lullaby from the hallway. Eventually, she came back downstairs. Her phone lay on the kitchen counter, face down. Then I heard a beep, the Alexa speaker lighting up with that soft, innocent blue ring. Before that moment, I never paid much attention to Alexa's random updates. Traffic, weather, music. But this time, it was Becky's voice, soft, breathy, a confession made in a hush. A snippet of a conversation she'd had earlier that day, apparently saved or repeated by Alexa's glitch. "I love you," she had whispered. And then a name. Mike. When I tell you my whole world cracked, believe me. 1 second, I was a tired husband with an overworked mind. The next, I was stabbed awake by the raw betrayal inherent in those few words. I heard the message repeat in my head. I love you, Mike. Like a razor under the ribs, twisted and slow. I shot up from the armchair, heart pounding so hard I thought I might black out. The living room walls felt too close, my breath shallow. My mind whirled. Was it real? Did I hallucinate? But the echo of her voice lingered in the air. She'd said it. There was no question. She'd said it to him. I stormed into the kitchen, eyes darting, not fully sure what I wanted to do. Becky was there, rummaging for a glass in the cupboard. I braced a hand on the table's edge, fighting the urge to shout. Alexa, just. I began, my voice trembling with adrenaline. I heard your voice. She whipped around, eyes wide. What? Matt, what are you talking about? I motioned toward the device. My hand shook, but I tried to steady it. Alexa, she played. Something. A snippet. You said. My lips quivered. I couldn't get the words out. Becky took a step forward, her face suddenly pale. I don't. I have no idea. Must be some glitch. Some glitch, I echoed, swallowing a bitter taste in my mouth. Or maybe you were telling someone you love them. Someone whose name you whispered. It's not. You're misunderstanding. Who? Tell me. She opened her mouth. It's Mike. Then she caught herself. He was confiding in me about his problems. And I said it, but not in that way. Like family. Like I love you, man. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't. Stop, I said. My voice lashed out more viciously than I'd expected. Just stop. Do not insult me. That's when she tried to justify, tried to spin it. Her voice trembled with desperation, but I cut in, finishing sentences for her. She'd say, we were, and I'd retort, you were lying. She'd say, it's just, and I'd say, it's just betrayal. She tried to weasel out of each phrase, but every time, I finished it for her in a harsh monotone. She broke into tears, her face contorting in shame, or maybe fear of losing the comfortable life we had. I watched her cry and felt a surge of something hot and painful in my chest. Love? Betrayal? Rage? I couldn't isolate the exact emotion. All I knew was that the woman I married had let another man into a space that was mine. I didn't scream that night. I didn't demand she pack up and go. No. Instead, I just stared at her, silent, in a cold fury that took hold of me deeper than any anger I'd ever known. It scared me how quiet I was. Even Becky seemed unnerved, flinching every time I exhaled. Finally, I turned on my heel and locked myself in the upstairs bathroom. I sat on the edge of the tub, hands shaking, vision blurred by the sting of tears I refused to let fall. I stayed like that until sunrise. I wish the next part never happened, but it did. It came from a sick place in me, a place hungry for confirmation of the worst. I decided to run a DNA test. I had reasons, I told myself. Our youngest child, something about their eyes, the shape of their mouth. I'd never questioned paternity before, but once suspicion burned bright, it refused to dim. Becky had always brushed it off. He has your sense of humor. That's for sure, she'd say when he told jokes. But I remembered Mike's jokes, that damned smirk, the lines of his face. Suddenly, I saw them mirrored in my kid, and it felt like a vice on my throat. So I did it in secret, took a sample from my child, a swab from myself, packaged it, mailed it off. The waiting period was excruciating. Each day, I walked into the house, scanning for any clue that would confirm or deny the swirling suspicion in my head. Becky tried to pretend everything was normal. Cooking dinner, making small talk about the kids' after-school activities, asking if I had any big projects at work. I answered in monosyllables. My chest felt hollow. My mind buzzed with possible scenarios. I started noticing the small details, how Becky would go into the backyard for phone calls, how she'd check the calendar to see if I had any late-night work events. I realized, too, that Mike had gone quiet, no longer dropping by. Maybe he thought lying low would keep him safe. The day the results came in, I shut myself in my office at home. The kids were playing next door, and Becky was out shopping. That plain envelope felt like a ticking time bomb in my hand. I opened it with a letter opener slowly, methodically. The lines were short, clinical, unequivocal. 99.9% likelihood that I am not the father. I stared at those words, blinking, waiting for my heart to beat again. It did, eventually, but only to unleash a pounding dread and a new wave of betrayal. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I forced myself to read it again and again, like maybe if I repeated it enough times, I'd find an asterisk or a footnote offering a different conclusion. Nothing. The child I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, scolded over undone homework, was not mine. I don't know how long I sat there. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. All I know is that when I got up, the house felt different, like a set of illusions had been stripped away, leaving only bare reality. I walked down the hallway, looked into the bedroom. The bed that I'd shared with her. The pictures on the dresser. Me, Becky, the kids, smiling under bright sunshine. Lies. All of it. I remember picking one frame up, wanting to smash it. But I didn't. I just set it back down. That's when I decided. She wasn't worth the explosion of rage I could have unleashed. No, there had to be a different way. The next part is difficult to explain. I didn't transform into a cold-blooded monster overnight, but I felt my compassion slipping away. Where once I'd remind Becky to be careful with the old porch step, loose after the last storm, I stayed silent. Where once I'd keep the shower floor free of slick spots, meticulously drying it to keep the family safe, I let it remain wet, the tiles precarious. Her car's coolant leak, which I used to top off every week so she wouldn't break down on the highway, I ignored. Let her find out the hard way. Let her wonder why the temperature gauge kept edging into the red. Each neglected duty was a tiny act of retribution, a silent message. I am no longer protecting you. She must have noticed. She'd approach me in the kitchen and say, "Matt, I think something's off with my car. Could you?" And I'd cut her short, not even letting her finish. "Handle it yourself." Then I'd walk out of the room. Each time, I saw a flicker of hurt cross her face, but I felt no sympathy. That was the only power I had left, to watch her struggle with the mundane problems I used to shield her from. She tried to speak to me about the affair, about Mike. She'd corner me in the hallway after the kids were in bed. "Matt, we need to talk. I know I messed up, but..." She'd hesitate, waiting for my retort. But I'd say nothing, just stare through her. When she tried to elaborate, I'd walk away. Maybe it was cowardly. Maybe I should have let her speak, let her see the anger in me. But part of me knew that giving voice to my rage would only feed it, turn it into something uncontrollable. I wasn't ready for that. So I shut her out, and eventually, she stopped trying. She started tiptoeing around me in the house, like we were co-workers forced to share a break room, but who couldn't stand each other. Our children noticed the change. They'd glance between us at dinner, eyes wide, sensing the tension. I hated that. I hated that the once warm dinner table now felt like a war zone, the silence so thick it could choke you. But I let it happen. Because inside, my heart was forging something. Some plan, some final retribution that I couldn't quite put into words yet. Time inched forward. Days stacked on top of each other. I functioned like a machine at work, finishing projects and meeting deadlines, fueled by an undercurrent of fury. Some evenings, I'd return home and see Becky's car in the driveway. I'd wonder if she was alone in there, maybe texting Mike, maybe planning her next move. My mind conjured images I didn't want. Sometimes, after the kids fell asleep, I'd find myself in the backyard, staring up at the stars, letting the cold air prick my skin. I'd remember those words from Alexa. "I love you, Mike." and a scalding bitterness would coat my lungs. One night, I found Becky crying softly in the living room. She turned off all the lights. I only spotted her silhouette because of the faint glow of a street lamp through the window. She was hugging her knees, her shoulders trembling. For a second, I felt an ache, a temptation to comfort her. But then I recalled the DNA results, and that tender impulse died. Without a word, I crossed the floor and went upstairs to bed. She never followed. The day I put my plan into motion was a Saturday. I told Becky I had an early conference at work. Instead, I drove the kids to my mom's place, 2 hours away, across the state line. My mother has always been a practical woman, never prying, never judging. When I showed up at her doorstep unannounced, she gave me a long look that said she knew something was very wrong, but she didn't ask. She just nodded, ushered the children inside, and said, "They can stay as long as you need." I thanked her, quietly, voice tight with emotion. Then I kissed my kids goodbye, told them I'd see them soon, and slipped back into my car. On the drive home, I kept replaying a single line in my head. Revenge is not a reckoning. It's a liberation. I don't remember where I read it, maybe some old magazine or a friend's social media post. But it struck me. Vengeance wouldn't fix what she did. It wouldn't heal the wound or magically make me the father of that child. But it might free me from the poison in my veins, the shackles of heartbreak. Once I made peace with that, a strange calm settled over me. I arrived back at the house in the late afternoon. Becky's car was gone. She was probably off at some store or maybe meeting a friend for coffee. Fine. I used the time to gather my own essentials. Clothes, important documents, old family heirlooms that I couldn't stand leaving behind. I had no intention of scouring the place for every last sock, just enough to start over somewhere else. Then I wrote a letter, plain white paper, a ballpoint pen. I wrote with slow, deliberate strokes, the way you do when you're penning something final. "Becky, I heard you. I saw the results. I know everything. I'm not going to scream at you or break anything. I'm leaving. I've taken the kids to my mom's for now. They're safe, they're loved. I won't give you my new address. I don't want revenge. You will live with the silence I leave behind. Let Alexa explain it to you. Let the bruises on your conscience whisper what I never will. And maybe one day, you'll wonder if any accidents in your life were truly accidents at all. I'm done. I'm not coming back." Matt, my hand shook when I set the pen down. I reread it once, then folded the paper and placed it on the coffee table. That was it. No confrontation, no dramatic tears or final argument. Just the cold, flat truth of what I felt. Before I stepped out the door, I remembered something. The old deck step. I'd always meant to fix it. Becky had asked me about it a dozen times. "Han, that step is wobbly. Can you check it?" I'd say sure, but never got around to it. Now, I realized I didn't have to. It would remain that way, waiting for someone else to misstep. An accident waiting to happen, or maybe just a reminder that I no longer cared. As I drove off, I felt hollow. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just empty. My phone buzzed in my pocket, likely Becky wondering about the kids. I ignored it. The weight of every memory pressed down on me, but I forced my gaze forward. I was leaving the life I built, but that life was built on a lie. The best I could do now was walk away. I wandered for a while. Checked into a shabby motel on the outskirts of Seattle, just for the night. The walls were thin, the bed was lumpy, and the fluorescent light flickered. But I welcomed the discomfort. It matched the raw ache in my gut. I sat there, thinking about how quickly things unravel. One day, you're comfortable in your routine. Work, dinner, bedtime stories. The next, you're in a cheap motel with a half-dead lamp. Your entire world turned to ash. Becky tried calling 5 more times that evening. I watched the phone's screen light up. Her name glowed. Then, after midnight, a text. "Where are you? Are the kids okay? Please, talk to me." I didn't respond. I let the phone go dark each time. By morning, the ache wasn't gone, but it was less sharp, like a scab forming over a wound. I realized I was done with the city, done with all the local reminders of Becky and Mike. I checked out, loaded my suitcase in the trunk, and called a friend who managed short-term rentals in a nearby coastal town. By nightfall, I was in a small cottage by the water, the roar of waves crashing behind me. Cold, gray Washington coastline. Perfect for a man who needed to hide. The next weeks passed in a blur of salt air and numb routine. I'd wake up early, walk the shore until my legs felt like lead, then come back and try to piece together how to move forward. I'd call my mom to check on the kids. She never pushed for details, just told me they were doing fine, though they asked for me every night. It hurt, but I couldn't be there. Not yet. I was still too raw, too angry. My mind replayed the cruelty of it all. The vow she broke, the child that wasn't mine. The cold, unstoppable realization that the simplest things, a morning cup of coffee, a weekend drive, that spontaneous trip to the zoo, had all been overshadowed by her secrets. And I thought of Mike, my cousin, who once toasted at our wedding, raising a glass to lifelong happiness. Now I saw him as the embodiment of everything shallow and arrogant. The nights I spent imagining them together, I'd squeeze my fists until my knuckles went white, rage pulsing through me. Then I'd remind myself, I left. I'm free. Let them stew in the aftermath. On the darkest nights, I wanted to do something insane. Burn down the house, confront them both with a fist to Mike's jaw. But each time I got close to that line, I remembered that revenge is not a reckoning. It's a liberation. I already liberated myself. Why ruin it? Let them twist in the unknown, wondering if I might strike. That was enough. Eventually, Becky tracked down my mother's phone number. That was inevitable. She called and spoke to me on speaker, with Mom right there, arms folded, looking concerned. Becky's voice was trembling, riddled with panic. Please, she said. I need to see you. Just tell me where you are. The kids. She trailed off. I interrupted. The kids are fine. And that's all you need to know. She sobbed. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. It's not. I never wanted it to go this far. God. Matt. Please. I ended the call. Stared at my mom, who gave me a sad, sympathetic nod. She didn't ask questions. She just placed a hand on my shoulder, the way mothers do. And that was that. 2 months passed. My absence left a void, but Becky didn't file any missing person report or anything dramatic. She must have known I was alive and in contact with the kids. Legally, I had no issue with my own child. My daughter is biologically mine, and the younger one I had raised from birth. But that's a legal labyrinth I wasn't ready to sort out. I just needed distance, and though the thought of them ached, I also clung to the idea that I was saving them from seeing me in my worst state, bitter, hateful, and unhinged. I found a temporary gig in the coastal town, helping a local construction crew. The physical labor was a release. I could drive nails and lift beams until my muscles burned, sweat pouring off me. It felt cathartic, forging something new while everything inside me was in ruins. One evening, I came back to the cottage, exhausted, and found a letter slipped under the door. No address, no stamp, which meant Becky or Mike had found me. My heart hammered as I scanned the front. It just said Matt in an all too familiar handwriting. I nearly tore it to pieces unread, but curiosity won out. I unfolded it. Matt, I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. I wish I could explain everything. I never wanted to hurt you. Does that sound empty? Probably. But it's the truth. Mike was there. And we had this connection. I was lonely, and it got out of hand. It doesn't excuse anything. The kids ask about you every day. They miss you. I miss you. I know you probably hate me, but I'm begging you. Talk to me. Let's figure out a path forward. Even if it's just for the kids, I can't take the silence anymore. Becky, I stared at the letter until the words blurred. The silence was precisely what I wanted for her. To feel the vacuum of betrayal, the void that can't be filled with apologies. I crumpled the paper and tossed it in the trash. A black wave of anger washed over me. But I didn't call her, didn't text, just let her stew. The next day, I found a deeper calm. Maybe it was the ocean breeze, or the realization that I had no obligation to respond. Maybe it was remembering how I discovered the DNA test results, and that I'd been humiliated on every level. Betrayal of trust, betrayal of fatherhood. She couldn't repair that with a letter. The only reparation, if any, was the complete meltdown of her illusions. I thought about the old me, the one who would have done anything to fix problems, who would have poured everything into saving the marriage. That me was gone, burned away in the fire of her dishonesty. Weeks turned into months. My daily routine stabilized. Work, ocean walks, the occasional chat with Mom about the kids. I didn't have a plan for how to move forward with them. I just knew I wasn't ready to face the heartbreak I'd see in their eyes. But time's natural momentum began pushing me to consider the next steps. I needed something more permanent. A real job that matched my skills. A place for me and my children. At least my daughter, if my younger child's paternity turned complicated. Guilt knotted in my chest, thinking of that sweet kid, wondering if or when I'd see him next. I might not share his blood, but I raised him. He was mine in every way that mattered except biology. That's a conflict I wrestled with nightly, staring at the cottage's ceiling, hearing the waves pound the shore. One afternoon, I got a text from Becky. The first words that flashed across my screen were, "We need to talk about your son." My breath froze in my lungs. My son. A pang shot through me, the realization that she still wanted me to see him as my boy. After everything. I didn't open the text. I deleted it. Then I sat on the sofa, burying my face in my hands. If the cost of staying free from her was giving up that child, was that something I could handle? My tears came hot and furious. I let them flow, not caring if the neighbors heard me cry out like a wounded animal. This was the heartbreak men rarely voice. We just break inside, a silent supernova. But that day, I let it out. My face was soaked, my chest heaved, and my throat felt raw. That meltdown did something for me. It purged the numbness. Over the next few days, I began formulating a plan. I'd get legal advice, figure out custody or visitation or something. Because that child, whether or not my DNA ran in his veins, was mine in spirit. I didn't want Becky controlling that relationship, and I sure as hell didn't want Mike stepping into the paternal role. Let him try. I would fight that to the bitter end. So I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer. Told him everything in broad strokes. He was professional, calm, explained the complexity of establishing or disputing paternity in this state. In some respects, the law sides with the marital presumption. Meaning, if the child was born within the marriage, I'm considered the legal father unless I actively contest it. The lawyer recommended I proceed carefully. I nodded, numb, but weirdly relieved to have some sense of direction. I might still have a hold on my family, at least the children I raised. During those lawyer meetings, I found myself imagining the final confrontation with Becky. The scene played out in my mind. Me, standing before her, telling her all the ways she'd gutted me. Telling her that no matter what, I'd always care for the kids, but she was dead to me. Maybe I'd let her speak, let her sputter an apology, just so I could shut it down. In my fantasy, I was stoic, unyielding. She was the one trembling. But when that meeting eventually happened, it wasn't as theatrical as I'd pictured. I agreed to meet Becky in a neutral place, the lawyer's office. She arrived looking gaunt, her eyes red-rimmed, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She fidgeted with her hands as she sat down across from me at the table. I let the lawyer do most of the talking. Becky tried to speak a few times. "Matt, if you'd just," and I'd slice the air with my hand, cutting her off. My voice was level, formal. I want shared custody for both children. I don't care about the DNA. I raised him. You let me believe he was mine. So he is mine. She swallowed, tears welling up. Yes, of course. You can see them anytime you want. I'll do anything to fix. There is no fixing, I said. Only salvaging what's left. The lawyer cleared his throat. I kept my eyes on Becky, feeling the weight of years, of illusions, pressing on my chest. I realized I still had some residual hope I didn't want to admit. Maybe a twisted part of me wanted her to pull out a miracle that erased the betrayal. But that's not how the world works. In the end, we hashed out a bare-bones agreement. I'd rent a place back in Seattle, so the kids wouldn't be uprooted from their schools. Becky insisted she pay part of the rent if necessary. I refused. I don't want her money. Let her keep the child support arrangement if she wants, but I'd prefer to handle my own finances. The tension in the room was suffocating, but I kept my composure. Right at the end, though, she touched my arm gently. Her voice cracked. Matt, I moved my arm away. We're done here. That night, after I returned to my cottage, something inside me settled, like a stone dropped to the bottom of a well. I realized I'd taken the first step toward living again, acknowledging that life goes on after betrayal, after illusions shatter. I wasn't sure how the day-to-day would unfold, splitting time with the kids, ignoring Becky's pleas, dealing with Mike's presence. But I felt the strangest sense of calm, almost like the dull throbbing after a limb goes numb. Maybe that was as good as it would get for a while. Revenge, as I once envisioned it, no longer seemed like the final prize. Sure, it had felt satisfying at first, letting her fear the loose step, letting her wonder about me, letting her face the silence. But in the end, it didn't fix the hole in my heart. No act of payback could return what I'd lost. The only real liberation was stepping away from the wreckage and deciding to live for myself and the kids on my terms. 2 weeks later, I found a modest 2-bedroom apartment near the children's school. Nothing fancy, just enough space to make them comfortable on nights they stayed with me. When I pulled up to the curb with my boxes, I saw Becky's car. She stepped out with the kids, our daughter and our boy. My throat tightened at the sight of them. They ran forward, calling Dad, in that innocent, joyful tone that used to make me feel on top of the world. I crouched down, arms open, letting them collide into me. I closed my eyes, inhaling the smell of their hair, hugging them so tight they squealed. In that moment, I felt the raw ache of what had been taken from me, but also the comforting presence of what was still mine. They were my children, no matter what. Becky hovered a few steps away. I stood, signaled for the kids to run inside and pick out their rooms. They rushed off, excited. That left her and me. She looked thinner, her eyes haunted by guilt. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, 1,000 unspoken words hanging in the air. She finally said, "Matt, I want to." "Don't," I interrupted. "I don't want your apology. Keep it." She exhaled shakily. "What can I do?" "You can leave," I said, the dryness in my voice cutting like a blade. She nodded, tears forming. "All right. Call me if you need anything for them, or if you ever want to talk." I said nothing. I turned and walked inside. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it gently, the click echoing in the stillness. The kids were already running around, voices echoing in the barren walls of the new apartment. My new life. I forced a smile, swallowing the heaviness in my chest, and I began to help them settle. We found a rhythm. I stayed polite but distant with Becky. The kids got used to the two-home arrangement. They never fully understood what happened, and I didn't want to poison them with details. I simply told them that Mom and Dad needed space, that it was adult stuff. They were sad but resilient. That's the beauty and tragedy of childhood. They adapt, even to heartbreak. From what I heard, Becky continued her freelance work. Mike's name came up rarely. The few times it did, I shut down any conversation. Our extended family mostly kept quiet, tiptoeing around the scandal. My mother supported me but never demonized Becky to the children. I respected her for that. One late night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the quiet suburban skyline. Rows of streetlights, the faint silhouette of distant buildings. I thought back to the day I discovered the affair. The voice from Alexa. The shock. The heartbreak. 1,000 images rushed through me. Becky's tear-stained face, Mike's awkward grin, the swab test I'd mailed off. I felt the prick of tears again, not from sorrow, but from the enormity of it all. And in that swirl of memory, I found something like acceptance. I whispered to the night air, "I'm still here." Maybe that was my final confession, my final vow to myself. I didn't break. I didn't lose. I walked away with my dignity, scared but intact. And now, the storm was behind me, or at least receding. The kids were asleep in their rooms, dreaming about tomorrow. I had them. Maybe that was enough. A few days later, Becky accidentally dialed my number, or so she claimed. I heard her inhale sharply when I picked up. I'm sorry, she stammered. I meant to call someone else. Okay, I said, about to hang up. Wait, she blurted. I saw Mike today. It was nothing. I just wanted to let you know. In case. In case of what? I asked, my voice neutral. She fumbled for words. In case it bothered you. I breathed in, controlling the flicker of anger in my chest. It doesn't. She was silent. Finally, she whispered, "Are you ever going to forgive me?" A long pause. My hand squeezed the phone so hard I thought it might crack. Then softly, I replied, "I don't know." That was it. I hung up, and for the first time in months, I felt not good, exactly, but free of the need to pretend. I didn't have to feed her false hopes. I could just be honest. I didn't know if forgiveness was in the cards. And if it wasn't, that was my right. Life continued. My job stabilized. The kids' laughter returned to my home. Sometimes Becky would swing by to drop off clothes or pick them up, eyes lingering on me like she wanted to say something. I never gave her the chance. I made sure the kids were always in earshot, or I'd wait outside, ignoring any attempt at conversation. Maybe that was cruel, but I needed that boundary. As for Mike, I never confronted him physically. Some part of me craved that catharsis, the taste of blood in my mouth if we fought, the cracking sound of a punch. But a bigger part knew it was meaningless. He was a parasite, latching on wherever he saw weakness. That was on Becky as much as it was on him. No matter how many times he might try to contact me, I'd let it ring, let it go to voicemail. Let him wonder if I'd show up at his doorstep, keep him guessing. That was enough. Months turned into a year. The holiday season rolled around, cold winds blowing through the streets. I decorated the apartment with the kids, hung stockings on the small fireplace. Becky texted, asking if we could all do a big Christmas dinner. I wrote back, "No." That was all. She didn't press. That winter, I took the kids to a local ice skating rink. We clung to each other's arms, laughing when we slipped. My daughter giggled, my son squealed with delight, and I felt this wave of gratitude that they were mine, even if not by blood in one case. The heartbreak was still there, a dull phantom pain I carried, but it had softened around the edges, becoming part of who I was rather than consuming me. On New Year's Eve, Becky showed up unannounced. The kids were with me that night, and she wanted to see them for a quick hug before midnight. I hesitated, but the kids heard her voice in the hallway, so I let her in. We all watched the fireworks from the balcony. Becky stood beside me, arms folded, her breath visible in the cold air. The kids oohed and awed at the colorful bursts in the sky. I stayed silent. Then, the countdown. 10, 9, 8. My son clung to my leg. My daughter squeezed Becky's hand. And at midnight, the city erupted in cheers and flashes of light. I felt Becky's eyes on me. She whispered, "Happy New Year," tears glistening. I gave a polite nod, never meeting her gaze. Then I guided the children inside. She stayed a moment longer on the balcony, the door half open, the cold air creeping in. I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass, her face twisted in silent misery. I didn't feel glee. I felt an odd pang of empathy, but not enough to mend anything. She left soon after, hugging the kids fiercely, whispering something about seeing them next weekend. I kept my distance, leaning against the wall with my arms folded. When she finally closed the door behind her, a hush fell over the apartment. My daughter yawned, blinking tired eyes, and my son rubbed his nose sleepily. I scooped them both into my arms and carried them to bed. That was how I spent my first moment of the new year, holding them close. So how does it end? Maybe it doesn't. Not neatly. I'm still living each day, raising my children with as much love and consistency as I can manage. Becky's still around, her presence like an echo of the life we once had. We're civil for the kids' sake, but we don't share so much as a conversation. Mike. He lurks on the edges of our extended family gatherings. I ignore him. He ignores me. Or maybe he's just afraid. I'll never know. I haven't fixed the loose step on that old deck. Once in a while, I wonder if Becky ever did it herself. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she's too busy juggling guilt and a broken life. Sometimes, I picture her stepping outside one crisp morning, her foot landing on that faulty plank. A sudden snap, a twist of an ankle, a tumble. Would it be just an accident? The thought crosses my mind more often than I'd like to admit. My revenge is complete in that I no longer need to protect her. She can face her own misfortunes alone. I've come to accept that none of us emerges unscathed. She lives with the knowledge of what she did, and that's punishment enough. Mike will always wonder if I'm planning something, never quite sure. And me. I carry the scar of betrayal deep in my heart, but also the knowledge that I walked away. I found a life for myself and my children. That's what matters. Sometimes, very late at night, I recall that final letter I left her, about how I don't want revenge, only the silence to be her companion. And I wonder if she paces the halls of that big suburban house, half expecting me to return, or to confront her with fury. I won't. It's over. My calm, terrifying resolve is the last thing I'll ever give her. She might never know if that loose plank or that slippery tile was a simple oversight or something I let happen out of malice. She might never know if I intended to strike her car's brake lines or if it was all in her imagination. That's part of my liberation. Let her live with the uncertainty. As for me, I'm finishing this story in the quiet of my new home, the kids asleep in their rooms. A single floor lamp glows softly, illuminating the boxes of holiday decorations we just took down. I'm breathing, alive, free. My chest still hurts sometimes, but it's a reminder that I once trusted and was betrayed. I can learn from it. That's all. Tomorrow, I'll wake up early, make pancakes, tease my daughter about her messy hair, help my son with his math homework. Then I'll go to work, striving to be a better man than I was yesterday. Life goes on, and that perhaps is the scariest truth of all. Even after the deepest betrayal, after the ugliest heartbreak, we keep living. We carry the scars, we adapt, we push forward. We discover that revenge is not a reckoning, it's a liberation. And sometimes, the simplest form of vengeance is just walking away and letting the echoes of what you leave behind speak for themselves.